It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
With Barnett Bain. It's good to be here. I always feel grateful for being here.
It's so fun.
I always love being here. It never gets old.
Beats working. Hey,
we're not sure about that, but it never gets
We're doing.
old.
That was funny. You just answered from so both of us have been in the industry being the film industry, and there's this thing of, I don't know if that's where you're speaking from, but I just know there's this theme of how we're validated by working. Like, we're working. How are things going? I'm working. Like, that's the first thing you say.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, it's a kind of way that the industry operates where...
Are you working?
Are you working? That's it. Yeah.
What are you working on? To a certain degree.
I still see actor friends, and that little bit comes up of "Are you working?"
It's
brutal.
That is an energy that exists throughout the whole fabric of society. It shows up more clearly in an industry like the entertainment industry, which is primarily a freelance industry.
Yes.
It shows up there. But nonetheless, the underlying energy exists everywhere, and it shows up elsewhere as what do you do?
Yeah,
you meet somebody, and the first thing that you hear is, well, what do you do? Or the second thing, or the third thing.
What are your credentials? We're
hearing
from Professor Wright again.
Yeah.
What was the guy's name? The little guy? No, the guy we met at the Moth. Schmiel or something? The little professor, the guy that started this whole thing.
Professor...
I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But the little professor, we're hearing from the little professor. Inside of me, that's being reflected either by someone saying, what are your credentials?
That little archetype, little professor, the knower.
The knower.
Yeah.
It's a really, honestly, it's a really painful part of my experience. And when I hear from that aspect of me, my first initial tendency is to want to kill it in myself. I don't like it. And I don't like
because you're feeling that your entire expansiveness is being shoehorned into a small state. And unfortunately, it's a state that we relate to because it is such a hypersensitive state. There's so much overwrought energy around it that it is easily triggered, and then we buy into it, and it's still very raw. So
it's my 32-page resume.
Yeah. Do you have a 32-page resume?
No, I do not. I took a class one time, and I can't remember what the title of the class was, but the woman suggested that we create what she called a brag book, which was all these clippings, and she had this huge book of all the stuff she'd ever done, like, I'm sorry, going way back to like high school. I don't even know. I mean, like when I won the eighth grade,
I ran the football in the 8th grade.
Yeah. But the idea of, that level of tracking my wins,
of external validation, of extrinsic, seeking extrinsic
life is a competition, don't you know? Everything is about measuring myself in the context of what we call the second story of the winning game. First story, I'm not good enough, or these are my limitations.
I became good enough.
Second story is how I became how I won, and I'm it's brutal. And then to have it reflected in an industry where you're valuable and validated based on what you've done lately or what you're doing now.
But again, we're always validated. In the second story, we are always validated by external mirrors. So it is always about what do you do, who do you know, what can you do for me.
That's right.
Underneath the what do you do is the question underneath those kinds of relationships. And what we're really pointing to is that at a certain developmental level, all relationships are self-serving. So they're all about, irrespective of how loving, it's I love you, and so I will have somebody to love. I love you, so you will in turn love me back. or I love you, so we will share certain value. There's always a get.
Until you're out of the second story.
Until you're out of that story. Until it becomes, I love you because I choose to. So at that point, relationships cease to become transactional. I love you, or I'll love you, and so you'll give me something. That is not love. That is a bargain.
Yes. Can I tie this together just a little bit? So even going back to the little professor, what I was going to get to in that is my first response is to want to kill them or kill the part inside of me that they're reflecting, right? And I don't do this very often, but I have come to the place periodically where I've been able to have compassion for them. It's that sort of sweet sorrow, like, oh. And to the degree, and this truly doesn't happen often, but it has occurred, where I start off with that sense of loathing, and I am able to flip it, and it happened so recently. I can't give too much context because it will give too much away, and then it could get personal. I don't want to do that. But someone came in who was totally a master teacher and reminded me of my first wife. You remember me telling you about this? And it was so hard for me to move through that and get to the place of compassion. I am so compassionate right now. I'm so grateful every time it shows up, this individual, and they keep showing up, by the way. And when they show up, it's like the layer is always there to see. Like it's always my first reaction. It's not a huge reaction. It's like, and I'm able to make the transition to going, oh, and that is so generous. That is the third story. That transition, that piece of moving from who are you, what are you to me, what are you reflecting, I don't like it, in, out, good, bad.
Well, the moment that happens, I'm excited because pennies are dropping for me, gestalts are happening for me as I hear you say this. What happens is it shifts to an extension of an active caring that's born out of a personal experience of suffering. I have personally walked in those shoes, and so I understand the what that behavior is a reaction to. I understand why that behavior is an overcompensation for feelings of being less than. Or I understand, now it doesn't mean we always like the mirror, but we have an understand, and it extends out to forgiveness. So from that we can, we don't have to, the power of forgiveness in that way is not so much about I forgive the what that somebody does, but I can forgive the why, because out of my compassionate caring that comes out of having been firsthand in an experience, a similar sort of experience, I can have enough care to know what it is to walk in those shoes. So I can forgive the why.
This is the generosity of and the wisdom.
But now it's a giving.
Yes, this is
no longer a getting.
But this is
that's the third story. Now it's a gift.
And this is the generosity and the wisdom of love your enemy, because the enemy is you. The idea that there's an enemy right there, But
we don't. To love our enemies without having the peace in between, the bridge of belief that carries from us from the what is in the second story to the what can be in the third story. There is a seasoning, a wisdom, that piece of, until you've lived enough to be able to recognize your journey expressed maybe with different paint, but to see your journey expressed
and reflected
in another.
That's it.
Then the wisdom kicks in that says, I have understanding, even though I don't approve, even though I necessarily don't like, even though it may even be loathsome. I have understanding, and that is the compassionate frequency that gets patched in there without having lived enough to develop that wisdom, to simply say, well, you should be forgiving or you should be compassionate. It doesn't mean anything.
It's an inside job anyhow.
Yeah.
So where I think most people go wrong, where I went wrong in my experience, it's not wrong, it's developmental, I get it, but the trip cord is that it's out there, and it's not. So here's the big shift when we see everything as a reflection. Everything is a reflection or expression of us. There is no out there. And we start to own that. Is our choices change. The way we respond versus react to what is showing up in our universe, not the universe, our universe, is different. And that, again, is the wisdom of love your enemy, because your enemy is you, at least in the way that you're reacting to it. And
you're not your brother's keeper.
You're your brother. Yeah. So
fabulous.